In the past 15 years, 3 billion people were affected by natural hazards worldwide. Children make up as much as 60% of those impacted. When children's homes are damaged, their education interrupted, their families torn apart, the risk of psychological trauma, injury, malnutrition, and disease skyrocket. They can fall victim to abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. While natural hazards may be unavoidable, we can prevent disasters by focusing on at-risk communities with the goal of strengthening their resilience. UNICEF's aim is to strengthen social services that reduce disaster risk and are accessible to all. This is what we call resilient development, so that the next time there is a hazard, there is a plan in place. Here, and all around the world. Because a natural hazard doesn't have to become a disaster.
Xin chào and welcome to Sharing Vietnam on VTC10 Net Việt. In our today's program, we're going to talk about a really meaningful project from UNICEF Vietnam, Child-Centered Disaster Risk Reduction. This program is a long-term strategy for sustainable and resilient development to ensure that current and future generations can cope with climate change. I would like to introduce Ms. Mizuho Okimoto, Chief of Social Policy and Governance of UNICEF Vietnam. Thank you so much for joining our program today.
Thank you, Zhang. Thank you for having UNICEF. Hi, everyone.
To get started, could you share with us what are main goals of UNICEF Vietnam when you're implementing the project Child-Centered Disaster Risk Reduction Program?
So first of all, we want to support the efforts of the government to achieve and implement the key international climate change frameworks like the Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework. And both the government and UNICEF, we recognize that children are particularly vulnerable to climate change and natural disasters. They not only comprise almost 30% of the population, but many children in ethnic minority communities are already vulnerable because of their malnutrition, lack of access to clean water and sanitation, and also very weak caring practice, and not let alone the language barriers. So when natural disasters occur, social services like the education, health, nutrition, they're all disrupted and can have a lifelong impact. So one of the key goals of our cooperation with the government is to make sure that the system of disaster risk reduction are focused on children. They take into account the vulnerabilities of children, and they all together strengthen the system of responding but also preparing for disasters, and to make sure that the communities also have, and children themselves have the capacity to prepare better for natural disasters.
As we know, UNICEF Vietnam has collaborated with Ninh Thuận Provincial People's Committee in implementing this project in Ninh Thuận Province. So, how do you evaluate this implementation?
First of all, our cooperation with Ninh Thuận Province has been extremely meaningful because they demonstrate how policies can be implemented and how successful models, creative models, can be demonstrated. That could inform policy change and also scaling up good practices to other provinces. So that's a key objective of our collaboration with Ninh Thuận Province. I wanted to also mention that we work with Ninh Thuận Province, but also work very closely with the central government to make sure that this model actually is linked to the policy change at the national level. So we work very closely with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, the Ministry of Education and Training, Ministry of Health, and also Planning and Investment, and Ministry of Finance. They're all important ministries that all together need to coordinate to improve the models and also improve the policies to make sure these models are taken to scale. Some of the difficulties, I think, are precisely this coordination. We know that this requires cooperation of big ministries that have all individual sectoral priorities. So I think our role is to also work very closely with these coordination bodies in the government to make sure that all of the ministries, all of the partners focus on children and make sure that we join our hands together to achieve results for children.
During the time working in Ninh Thuận province, are there any stories or memories that made you most impressed?
Yeah, I think that what is really exciting to see is some crucial changes that happen in the system and that we can see on the paper that, for example, climate risks are integrated into sector plans and also the provincial plans, etc. But I think what is most rewarding is to see the leadership coming from the children themselves. So we had many child-led and youth-led activities that children themselves drew paintings, but also communicated and shared their views to the policymakers in the province. What are the key challenges they face because of climate change? What are their own solutions? And I think that is very important for the future and sustainability, because they are the future of Vietnam. And if they have strong leadership, they have creative mind, they have means to participate and express their views, they could change many things.
Charles Center Disaster Risk Reduction aims to apply the Bokomi model from Japan. Could you introduce some basic points about this model?
Through the study visits that we have done with the government, we have learned a lot from Japan, but also experiences from other countries. And what's very crucial for disaster risk reduction is it's very important that the government takes leadership in responding and also preparedness and also strengthening entire system. But the community plays a very important role. When there is a natural disaster in the community, there's flooding, there is storm, how could we know, who would know first who needs to be evacuated, who are the most vulnerable, who is in the market, who is in the school? And I think the community is only people who would know where they are, where their families are, where their relatives are, where their neighbors are. That's why the role of the community is extremely important. And the model looks at how we can link, for example, the health centers, the schools, also like child protection committees, and also like the newly established disaster prevention force under the leadership of Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. How all these different actors can come together, prepare a plan, and act when they're in times of disasters. So it is really community-led and not top-down. Yeah.
Children are the most vulnerable group in natural disasters. Considering this feature, UNICEF, ministries and central provinces have implemented the project Tri-Centered Natural Disaster Risk Reduction, focusing on disaster risk reduction activities and vulnerability. Through schools, UNICEF reaches out to children in many creative ways. The game Cool the Earth is one of the initiatives. The games reflect UNICEF Vietnam's belief that children are the present and future agents for change in disaster risk reduction and resilient development. UNICEF distributed the board games to 109 primary and secondary schools in 6 target provinces in June 2017 to reach 50,000 students. By playing the game, pupils have a heightened awareness and a thirst for knowledge about the climate change and its impacts on the community. Together with UNICEF Vietnam, the Department of Education and Training of Ninh Thuận Province has implemented the initiative of Safe Schools from Disaster. The initiative is based on 3 pillars. The first is building safe school facilities. Second is the safe school management before, during and after natural disasters. Third is disaster risk prevention and mitigation education in schools.
Tất cả các trường trung học cơ sở trên địa bàn tỉnh đều có xây dựng kế hoạch phòng chống giảm nhẹ rủi ro thiên tai trong trường học, và kế hoạch này đều có kết nối với cộng đồng và chính quyền địa phương. Thông qua các hoạt động diễn tập meeting, giáo dục phòng chống giảm nhẹ rủi ro thiên tai trong trường học thì học sinh có kiến thức, kỹ năng ứng phó được với thiên tai và biến đổi khí hậu. Và các em cũng có nhiều sáng kiến phù hợp với tình hình đặc thù thiên tai của địa phương, đặc biệt là tình hình hạn hán khẩn cấp trong những năm vừa qua.
In this approach, begin with the students, and through the students, the entire community around this central object is prepared to respond to disasters.
How do you evaluate the application of Bokumi model in Vietnam in general and also in the project in particular?
It's a remarkable effort that government of Vietnam has made over the last few years. They've changed the law on the natural disaster and prevention to bring community at the center, to empower them. I think now the challenge is how do we implement that? We need to conceptualize how those models work. We need to develop guidance. We need to also strengthen the capacity of communities, teachers, health workers, and children all play a part. So it's more, we see that the challenge is about implementing them, but also mechanisms.
For those difficulties that you have just mentioned, what solution has UNICEF Vietnam made to overcome those hardships?
First of all, we have a long-standing partnership with all the line ministries like Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, and I think that really helps to focus and make sure they integrate climate change risks into their sector plans and also services. So their efforts are very important because the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development and Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, other ministries, they help coordinate, but they need a lot of leadership from the line ministries. So that's very important that we work closely with the line ministries. I think at the subnational level, we are very much dependent on the leadership of the provinces, but also the communities. So we work very closely at all levels with the province, but also the communities, so that we can really demonstrate to the central government that these efforts can be taken up. They can invest government budget to scale up in other provinces.
Could you share some outstanding achievements that the project has accomplished so far?
With a very strong collaboration from the central and local authorities, one of the major contribution or achievements in Ninh Thuan province has been how the child vulnerabilities and climate risks are integrated into the annual socio-economic development plan. We feel that it is a very important achievement because the province can now allocate resources, allocate time for capacity development of the relevant officials, but also give responsibility to the community to also work together. So that's an important step. I would say also that the province has demonstrated Safe Schools initiative. It's one of the best in the countries, so in Vietnam. So when you go there, you could see that the whole education sector shows a very strong preparedness, and also in the future more efforts to strengthen the awareness of the children on climate change and air pollution. How do you also deal with single-use plastic, etc. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to build on these good results.
Once again, thank you so much for your sharing today. And we have to say that we really appreciate what UNICEF Vietnam has contributed to the Vietnamese children, and we're looking forward to more meaningful projects from UNICEF Vietnam in the coming time.
Thank you so much.
That's the end of Sharing Vietnam today. If you have any questions or recommendations, please send us to sharingvietnam@netvietv.net. Thank you so much for watching and hope to see you next time. Goodbye.